All right, hey folks, today we're going to be doing a full in-depth review, kind of a tutorial on automotive leathers. So I was able to get into my buddy's Aston Martin V8 Vantage and kind of just go through the leather and teach you guys the differences in aniline leather versus protected leather, what your vehicle probably has if you actually have leather. Um, Anyways, in the video you're going to be hearing a little ding. It's just from the door of the car being open. I didn't disconnect the fuse or anything, so it's you got a little ding. Just try and disregard that and focus on the content of the video. A lot of good information. So we'll go ahead and jump into it. Thank you and enjoy. All right, hey folks, we finally made it down here. We're checking out my buddy's 2011 V8 Vantage. So basically the two types of leather. 95% of cars are going to have a pigment dyed leather. The other 5% are going to have some sort of an aniline leather. All right, hey guys, just real quickly, I wanted to jump in here and just go over the two types of leather in a little bit more depth. We're going to be talking pigment dyed leathers, also known as protected leathers, versus the aniline or semi-aniline leathers. I created a little slide here for you, so let me show you guys that. Okay, so first we're going to be talking about the pigment dyed leathers or protected leathers. Now, this type of leather is used in over 95% of vehicles. They do this because it gives them the most consistent look as well as the most durability for the leather in your vehicle. So basically the original leather is taken, it's dyed, it's typically sanded and sometimes stamped. That's going to vary on the classification of where the leather came from. So in the next point, we're going to talk about that. You can either get full grain, which is typically the top grain leather is going to be your full grain. Top grain may be the term that you're more familiar with. But basically, that's the top layer of the leather. You'll see some scarring in that. You'll see the most natural state of the leather there. Next one is corrected grain. When you go in a little bit deeper, you'll have some scarring and all that kind of stuff. And with that, they typically sand it all down to remove all the blemishes in the leather. And then it is used from there. And then the split leather is the lowest quality of them all. It's usually stamped to create a grain. It's typically not as durable. So it's a lot of times if you look at your leather closely, you'll kind of see that the surface where you're actually sitting is one type of leather, and on the side bolsters, like on the side or the back of the seat, it'll be something different. That area can be a split leather, or they'll actually use vinyl for that. But those are the three main types of leather that are classified in the pigment or protected leather. All of them are going to contain a protective layer for durability against temperature changes, body oils, sun damage, spills, etc. The easiest way to compare this to something so that you can really comprehend it is just similar to painting wood. If you have a natural piece of wood and you paint, it's going to cover a lot of the blemishes. It's going to cover a lot of that grain. It's not going to show all the markings that it would naturally show. And that's typically what's going to be in your vehicle. Now, if we go over to the other side, we talk about aniline leathers. These aniline layers, they can have a protective layer. When they do have a protective layer, they're actually a semi-aniline. That's the second most used type of leather in vehicles. A pure aniline leather is very, very rarely used in vehicles just because it's so prone to damage and it's really hard to maintain. So the next one is going to be your semi-anilines. The most common example of that is going to be the Ford King Ranch. If you go in those vehicles, you notice the leather is different. It's more of a pure leather, and they actually use a semi-aniline. So it's an aniline leather, but it has a protective coating on it. With that protective coating, it kind of reacts similar to a protected leather, in that it will repel some things. It'll repel some water and things like that. Not quite as much as the pigment dyed leathers will, but it'll still repel, so that it gives you some longevity out of the leather. Aniline leathers are their most natural state. They're not as common as the other pigment dyed leathers. They basically use a special transparent aniline dye. So aniline is actually a chemical that is transparent, and that's the type of dye that is used to create an aniline leather. It allows the leather to show all the scarring, all the original natural grain, and everything else like that. So best way to compare that in your head, just so you get a your understanding of it is instead of painting the wood, you're using a stain on the wood. The stain allows all the grain and texture from the wood to show through as you're changing the color. So that's the two main differences. And again, guys, 95% plus of you are going to have a pigment dyed leather in your vehicle. Even in this video, we're going to be, we're showing the Aston Martin. That's using a nice full grain leather. So it's a better grade of leather, but it is still a pigment dyed leather. Okay, so if you get into some cheaper cars that have an actual leather, they're probably going to be using a corrected grain. And again, the split is probably just on the back. They're not going to use that throughout the whole vehicle. Outside of these leathers, then you go into the vinyls, and even companies like BMW, Mercedes, Lexus, they will have a vinyl where it looks like leather. So just make sure you're checking that with the manufacturer to make sure you're getting what you're expecting. If you're buying a brand new vehicle, then they are gonna, they're gonna have either leather or they're gonna have some sort of a leatherette, which typically they'll have their own name for. Mercedes, I believe it's called MB-Tex. BMW, I can't remember what theirs is, but I know Toyota uses SofTex. So anyways, those are all types of a vinyl. So in this video, we're going to be talking just mainly about the leather. So I wanted to break those two categories down for you so you had a good understanding of them.
So one of the biggest things that people always wonder about is proper cleaning and caring for your leather. Because they're pigment dyed and then coated on top, people there's a lot of controversy in the detailing world of, do conditioners actually do anything? Because if it's coated, is that actually penetrating through? And the answer is yes. It takes longer for it to penetrate through, but it does. You can kind of think of it like as a screen on a window. You can't go through it, but air and water can. Okay, so that's basically kind of think of it like that. Another example is if you were to leave a coffee cup, a little coffee ring stain right here, eventually that's going to seep through this top coat and get under it. So one of the main things you want to do is always properly clean your leather using a pH balanced leather cleaner, so that you're not drying out your leather. The other thing is when you condition, any of the products out there are going to be basically from the automotive industry, chemical guys, Meguiar's, all those guys, Lexol, are going to be made for these coated types of leather. So when you are coating it, what I like to do is I like to turn the heater on so it kind of opens up the pores of the leather a little bit more. And you want to mainly focus on all these seams, guys, because every stitch has a little hole in it, right? So that can really absorb the conditioner. You always want to stick right into the seams. Really pay attention to those areas. If you look on a car that hasn't been kept up, if you do this, you pull, you'll see there's be some separation around the leather and a bigger hole, and you don't want that because that's going to break down your leather even faster. So obviously this one he takes really good care of, and the leather is nice and supple and conditioned. Once again, when you're looking at your car's interior, the two ways to tell if you have leather are aniline, you'll be able to scratch it and it'll actually show, and pigment dyed, you'll actually be able to see some inconsistency in the grain of the leather, just meaning that it's actually from an animal. When you get into the vinyls, you'll see a completely consistent pattern all the way across in the grain. These manufacturers won't say that the interior is vinyl. What they'll do is they used to call it leatherette, and now people kind of caught on to leatherette knowing that it's not real leather. So now they've created their own branded names. Toyota, for instance, has SofTex. Mercedes has their own. BMW has their own on their lower end stuff. So what that is, it's actually a composite material. Back in I think it was the 80s, all these leather manufacturers would send their product out and they would make all these beautiful seats, and the remnants they would send back to China, and the factories out there would actually grind it down and mix it with a vinyl. So they were technically calling it leather because it had like 8% leather in it. But then the manufacturer started getting in trouble with that. Toyota had a big lawsuit. I think it was Hyundai had a big lawsuit with that, advertising their product as leather when it obviously was not. There was a slight bit of leather in it, but still it reacted more like a vinyl and would crack and things like that like a vinyl. So now they have their SofTex or whatever else. We'll put a list of names in the description below.
All right, guys, so here real quickly is an example of a vinyl. You can see the really consistent pattern all the way through the entire seat. The grain pattern is exactly the same all the way through. And that's actually from a Mercedes Benz ML350. So even if you have a Mercedes or something like that on the lower end, if it's under a $50,000 car, a lot of time they're going to be using a vinyl type of material branded under their own term. So again, Mercedes is MB-Tex, like this one. All right, folks, so that pretty much covers it. Pretty in-depth kind of tutorial on leather and what to expect in your car. If you have any questions about the video, put them in the comments below. I'll try and answer all of them and give you guys some more clarification if I missed anything. Other than that, go ahead and make sure you like and subscribe the video for more content on car detailing. Make sure you subscribe. Enjoy. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.